I'm going to talk about quantum advantage. And what I will discuss is how to use quantum physics to break certain limits that classical physics imposes on us, to do certain tasks that are not possible in classical physics. So first of all, what is classical physics? Classical physics refers to theories about things around us, big things, macroscopic things, things that we can see all around us. And in this theory, observables have definite values that are revealed by the measurement. So they exist there, we just watch them, and they are revealed by our measurements. If we think about information, about bits, we put these bits 0, 1 in some memory elements that are there, and we can see them, we can measure them afterwards. And the theory is also deterministic. So if you know what happens at some point, then you know what happens next after some time. If you launch a rocket, and rocket science is part of classical physics, you might be able, hopefully, to know where it will land. Differently from this, in quantum physics, we have small microscopic objects such as atoms, electrons, and so on. This is what the theory applies to. The theory is very different from the classical physics. Here, observables do not have values before being measurements. When you look at them, that's when the value is created. We have qubits instead of bits. So information is embedded in superpositions of states 0 and 1, which you can see here, C0 plus C1, with some complex coefficients, C0 and C1. And the theory is probabilistic. You never know where you end. You just know with some probability C0 square, modulus square, or C1 modulus square that you end up in one state or the other. So this is the difference. Now, sometimes in the 80s, Sir Tony Leggett, who is a distinguished condensed matter physicist, basically gave us permission to apply quantum physics to objects that are essentially macroscopic. So why not applying them to electrical circuits? They are large enough, they are macroscopic enough. And what kind of circuits can we think about applying them? Well, there is something which is called the Josephson junction, and that's the key element in what I'm going to discuss next, which consists of two superconductors separated by an insulating barrier. So the question is, what happens in the superconductor? Superconductors are materials that behave in a strange way when cooled down. Their resistivity goes basically to 0. And then you can push a current through them. But then you can push a current also through this kind of junction. And the amazing thing is that this being a Cooper pair, so electrons are paired in superconductors, they form so-called Cooper pairs. The amazing thing is that while this Cooper pair tunnels, it does it in such a way that the voltage drop across this structure is 0. So you can have a situation where you have a current flowing through a circuit, but the voltage drop across the circuit is 0, which makes the situation dissipationless, unlike when you have a resistor, for example. Now, how do things look like in reality? This is some of the reality that we are facing every day in the lab. What you see here is a picture of a qubit and a picture of another device called Josephson parametric amplifier. And what you also see is that in the corner there is that we can separate by single shot measurements the states 0 and 1. So we can really know whether the system ends up in the state 0 or in the state 1. And what is shown here near me is a really complicated machinery which combines cryogenics, very low temperature electronics, microwave control, and much more. It's complicated, but we can tame this beast. This is how things look like in reality. That's the belly of a dilution fridge, and that's where we install our electronics, and that's where the part that cools really to very low temperatures, to 10 millikelvin. So now I will discuss about some of the features of quantum physics that enables us to do tasks that are not possible in classical ways, or to break some boundaries that are limiting us by classical physics. And these features are coherence, entanglement, squeezing, and special ways of doing measurements. So I'm going to start one by one. Well, first of all, coherence. What is coherence? I told you that we have in quantum physics this superposition of C01 plus C11. And we can illustrate this type of phenomenon by this silhouette that rotates. How many people see it rotated clockwise? Raise your hands. All right, all right. How many counterclockwise? All right. So part of the audience sees it and very convincingly moving in one direction, rotating in one direction. Part of the audience sees it in the other direction. That's what the coefficients C0 and C1 are for. But in reality, it doesn't rotate in any direction. This is just a shadow, a collection of pictures of a shadow. There is really no rotation of this silhouette. It's just in our minds. And that's not the only thing that we can do. So what we can do now is to play with these coefficients, this complex C0 and C1. Let's try to do that. Let's first represent them as some kind of wiggles, some kind of waves, because that's what they are in the end. So let's put them in equal ways on the state 0 and on the state 1. And we can do some operations with them. Let's see what happens if we try to overlap them one on top of each other. So we move it up, we move it up, we move it up, and so on. And you see that they reinforce each other. They overlap and they reinforce each other. And the result is this thing. So this is called constructive interference. It adds up to the signal. We can do something else. Instead of overlapping like before, I can shift a bit the lower one, like this, by a phase pi, and then try to do the same thing. I will try to overlap them and see what happens. So what happens in this case is that these two waves, they cancel each other. If I sum them up, you see that the result is exactly 0. It's flat line. All right, by using this kind of operations, we can do some very interesting applications. We can measure magnetic fields with a very, very high precision. And this precision is of the order of micro flux quanta divided by square root of hertz. We do these operations by applying a sequence of pulses to the qubit. And based on the results of the measurements, we can find out the value of the magnetic flux. So this is how it works. Step by step, we start with a probability distribution, and by using these pulses and some feedback, we can narrow down the probability distribution to a shape which is much more narrower. It's much narrower. It's narrower than the classical thing, which we can do just by normal simple averaging. So by doing quantum physics, we can obtain something, a better precision than what is can be done in a classical way. All right. We didn't agree about in which rotation this silhouette rotates, but what we can surely agree is that these two silhouettes, they rotate in opposite directions. This phenomenon is called entanglement in quantum physics. And this correlation, this synchronization of these two dancers in quantum physics turn out to be, in a mathematical, very precise sense, stronger than what can be achieved in classical physics by using two real silhouettes rotating in opposite directions. And that's the key element that is used in quantum computing. So I'm going to show you how this thing works. In quantum computing, we can create, in principle, superpositions of the type that we discussed before, and entangled states that are much more complex. Suppose that we have 1,000 qubits, and we can create a state that looks pretty much like there, with complex coefficients for each of these states. How many complex coefficients there are? You can easily count them. There are 2 to the power of 1,000 complex variables there, which is about 10 to 300, which is larger than the number of particles in the universe. So there is no chance that we can take each of these complex coefficients and write them down on some particles and store them in some memory element. No chance. And the amount of time that one would need to do a calculation with this kind of state in a classical way will by far exceed the age of the universe. And so this is the thing that we are trying to do, how to use these correlations and how to use these features of quantum physics to do tasks and to calculate things that are impossible in classical physics. And indeed, this is the place where we are now. This is Charles Babbage mechanical computer. And in quantum computing, we are going to use these correlations and this constructive interference that we discussed in order to encode the problem and to detect exactly the solution of the problem that we are aiming at. Okay, what we are planning to do in Otaniemi. There is a lot of data that goes in these computers, as I just told you. So we were wondering how to feed this data in a quantum computer. So what we will do is we will have an optical connection between two buildings, between the metrology building of VTT and our building, and we will control this quantum computer by optical means that have a higher bandwidth, so we can put more data into our quantum computer. Next, I'm going to talk about squeezing, another very nice feature of quantum physics. Silencing the whisper of nothingness, we could have it as a subtitle. So what does it mean? Suppose that I have a box filled with particles, and I empty the box. I take out all the particles from the box. What is left when we measure, it's not really nothing. We'll still have a signal, a noisy signal that looks like this in terms of what we call quadratures. P and Q will be our quadratures. And this feature is due to the fact that we have the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which limits our precision to which we can measure P and Q. All right, we can do some other trick. We can eliminate the particles, and we can squeeze a bit. We can modify the boundary conditions of the box. What happens in this case is that we're going to get a squeeze state. So the precision which we can get on the vertical scale in this feature, in these pictures, is going to be much better or significantly better than the vacuum that what a classical state would allow, in fact. And we have done this type of experiments in which we can control these squeeze states by using a potential that generates a phase diagram, as you can see here. And by doing so, we can use these features as a way to measure single photons of the microwave field. So this allows us to go to very sensitive values by controlling this effective potential that you can see in this picture. Quantum measurement. If you look at this picture, you can see that the dots that you see here, they blink between white and black, depending on whether you look at them or not. The same thing happens in quantum measurements. You don't know what you will get until you get the result. And what we are planning to do is to explore part of the universe that is currently completely unknown. 85% of the matter in the universe is in a so-called dark state, in which we don't know what it is. And possible candidates for this are so-called axions. These are particles that are supposed to make up the dark matter. And in this project, what we are going to do is to devise some detectors that would reduce the sensitivity of the existing holoscopes that detect these particles. So how do we do that? We have a linear amplifier, and that's not good enough. In a linear amplifier, to get better sensitivities at these low levels of signal, it's not going to work. And that's because a linear amplifier adds 1/2 of a quanta of noise. That's due also to the fact that we are subjected to the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. So the way to go around it is to use the number of particles instead and the phase. We're going to measure the number of particles and put all the uncertainty in the phase. You see that this red disk has become now spread around, that it has become a circle which is very, very thin, and that increases our precision. So to conclude, we want to do experiments that demonstrate that quantum physics goes beyond classical physics in achieving better precision in sensing and in certain tasks that relate to quantum sensing and quantum simulation and quantum computing. And that's a great path forward. If we manage to do that, then it means that we have put in evidence a lot about how nature works and how quantum physics work. Let me thank my family, my collaborators, my colleagues, and the funding agency for all the support. Without them, I wouldn't be here. Thank you.